Morning.
Morning.
This place is so funny, isn't it? It's a tough, interesting place to be.
TC Life.
Yeah.
Hashtag.
Hashtag wild. But there's a lot of people changing their lives around here. And to get to that point, there's a lot of stuff we got to go through. There's a lot of stuff inside that we got to get dealt with. There's that, but then there's also the physical, where the physical man's been beat up for years, guys. The physical man's been on all these meds for years, and in some cases, no. So then you come here and you're trying to change everything. Man, there's gonna be, you're gonna meet resistance, from the enemy, from your body. Your mind might turn on you, But we persevere, right?
Amen.
And we gain these victories every day. We may have, in any given day, individually, we may have 10 small emergencies, you know what I mean? In our minds where we think, holy crap, I gotta get out of here. I'm trapped. I can't do this. You might break down crying, and you may be in the shower, no one can see you, hopefully, crying. Or you may be out in the open, you may be breaking down crying. And in Teen Challenge, I often say, if you're not crying, you're not trying. Because if you are going to change for good, the guy that you've molded for 20, 30, 40, 50, however many years, Jim, if you're going to change that guy, you're going to meet resistance. It can't be that easy for everyone to do. The whole world would be full of good, decent people, but it's not, right? That's the minority, for certain. The good, normal, decent people, and that's what we're trying to do. Not necessarily normal, but we want to go out, and we just want to be good people. We just want to live life. We don't want to be in jail anymore. We don't want to be in psych wards anymore. We don't want to get in fights anymore. We don't want to lose our wives and our kids anymore. So we're going to meet resistance, right? And it's going to be tough. But just to persevere and get through a day where you thought maybe you couldn't is kicking the enemy in the teeth and getting through it is a victory that you're gaining each and every day. Whenever you meet something that before used to tangle you up or maybe used to make you get high, you couldn't do nothing but get high when this certain thing happened, whatever. Now it happens and you just step over it and you just go on about your day. That's a victory. That's huge. And the next time you meet that adversary in the hallway, it's easier. And easier. And easier. And eventually you can hold, grams of heroin and speed and pill. I mean, you can hold it in your hand and you can not do it. That's a tough place to get to. I mean, it's not easy. But it happens. And it doesn't happen overnight. Right? And that's what I want for each of you guys. I want you just to be able to have victories in your life. I don't want you to get tripped up anymore by anything. So, along those lines, why are we here? We're here to change. We're just here to change. If there wasn't nothing in your lives that you wanted to change, you wouldn't have come, right? But comfortable people, they don't change. Comfortable people stay the same, right? Because it's comfortable. So let's work through the uncomfortability, guys, of being here, and the difficult things and these emergencies that we're going to have mentally. And sometimes physical. Let's work through them. Let's get it taken care of, bit by bit. So if you have 10 things going on in your life today that are emergency, you got something going on at home, girls running around on you at home, that happens, right, Chad?
Real.
That happens, but we're here, They're out there. All we can worry about is us. You got an emergency, you got a problem with a brother, I don't know. That's another thing. We got to fix it. But what the deal is that you can't fix them all at once. One at a time. Bam. 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 Don't let things slide either. Be direct in your lives. Hit it. Hit it head on. First thing. Job 1. Take care of that. Job 2. Take care of that. End of the day, you can sleep at night. And that's a good feeling. Be able to sleep at night. Be comfortable with yourself. Know that you did your best. And that you're victorious that day. That's a big deal. But in keeping with with that introduction. Like, what my life was, guys, was crap. It was a terrible thing. It was homeless, psych wards, thief, fighting. More like getting beat up is more like what it was. I couldn't never shut my mouth. There was a lot of gambling. There was a lot of, and I couldn't let nothing go. Right? I just couldn't let nothing go. It's just so I was always getting in fights and never winning them. I never learned my lesson either. I was down. Golly. I was mopping up barroom floors for years, and I don't know, I guess I learned from it in the end, but just those difficult times, and it was bad. I didn't do no good for nobody, right? It was all about me, and it was all about what I felt. It was all about my feelings, and how can Zach feel good today, and so on and so forth, and what do I got to do to make sure I do feel good? But so I come here, and how do I change all that? How do I change all that? Well, they tell me, read the Bible, pray about it. Is that it? That's two steps. But then comes with that all these 10 million little rules. About 2 million of them that make sense, but they're rules nonetheless. And it taught me obedience. The Word taught me everything. Not everything in the world. I'm not that smart, but everything I need to know. The Word showed me. Every question I had about how to make myself a better man, how to be a better father, how to eventually be a husband someday. The Word taught me. The Word taught me how to get through this program that was at times tough, at times downright impossible, at times just so irritating. And I'll tell you another thing about flipping out sometimes. That happens, guys, and it's okay. It's okay. Just try not to do it when we're at church or something. But, dude, that happens too. I had a dude flip out right in the middle of church and F you, F God, F. I remember that. I've had it. I've seen it. These things happen. So don't do that. But flip outs happen, dude, and I'll tell you, I was a really good student. I was a very good student. I got wrote up just a few times. Shut up, Chad. I got wrote up just a few times. Not very much. Carmichael was always hitting me for drinking sodas in my room. But I got wrote up very few times, guys. I did my work. I did well. I completed the Learning Center in 2 months. I probably rushed, but it was like I wanted to get the lecture class finished, and they didn't let me go to lecture class anyway. But I did the green pens and stuff. But I was a really good student, but still, I flipped out a few times. I downright flipped on people because they made me mad or something. Downright flipped, didn't I, Chad? Chad's seen them. Man, I got a story about that. This one time, this kid was coming through the lunch line. Chad and I were serving him, and I guess he didn't want salad. I guess. I was serving salad, and I put it on his tray, and some got on his mashed potatoes, and he flipped it like that. And it got on our serving line, mashed potatoes did. And I'm kind of stunned for a minute. I'm like, I'm so mad. He goes and he sits down, and I tell Chad, I can't do it. And I took a big old, he goes, I don't want salad. And I took this big old clump of salad, and I ran to his table, and I just, bam, just slammed it. I'm like this. I'll shut that salad down. The whole cafeteria is dead silent. Dead silent. And nobody stopped it. No one did nothing. He didn't do nothing. He was shocked too.
He started eating salad?
He better have, I don't know. But it's dead quiet, and then I just walk back. Walk back to serve my line. It's still dead quiet, and then yeah! Everybody just cheers and goes nuts. It wasn't right, and ended up I got a talking to about it, but no one tried to address me right then. And that's the thing also. we're gonna have tough days, guys.
Yeah.
And it's such a tight space, and it's even tighter for you guys, unfortunately. But man, you guys are persevering every day, and it's really cool to see. And you guys are growing, and some people are growing through physical pains, mental, emotional things, medical
Failure.
growing through failure. Yeah. You know, guys are making serious changes in your life, and it's a really big deal. But what happened was when they told me to read the Word and pray, I did it. I did it. That's all I did. I stayed out of the lobby. I stayed in my room and I read and I studied, and that was it. But in doing that, God highlighted some things for me. He made the Old Testament really come to life for me, and I'm so thankful for him. In this Bible, this was my study Bible. I don't know where it starts. There's a page that just says Old Testament, you know, and I wrote in it, God has heard my cry, and he gave me you, on my Old Testament page. And it's what happened was this OT, I love the whole Word in its entirety, and it's a beautiful thing. But God's going to highlight different areas for different people, because that's how the body works. If Blaine's the bicep, and I'm the ear, and Ted's the mouth, it's not Ted's job to hear. He's the mouth, right? It's not my job to be the bicep. Right. So God's going to make things, he's going to highlight things for you that maybe you want from me so that you can build me up where I'm weak, and I can build you up where you're weak. That's the body. But so the Old Testament, guys, is my baby doll, and we're close. We know each other. So the OT is the Hebrew Bible. All right, we're just going to run through some slides. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, write them down and put them in my box. And I want to talk to you about it. All right. But we're just going to run through some slides. And I want to highlight some things in the OT that might excite you, or it might perk your ears up to one chapter where you're going to dig in a little more. You just, maybe you hear something that interests you. I just want to see if we can't run through some things and maybe highlight some stuff. So the OT is the Hebrew Bible. Our Old Testament is the Jews' Bible. It's their whole Bible. What they call it is the Tanakh. And Tanakh stands for Torah, that's the law. The Ketuvim, that's the writings. And the Navim, that's the prophets. And so, you know how our Bibles broke up, and we're going to go through those sections. Our Bibles broke up with, you know, the wisdom books, all that, right? You know, theirs is just broke up into three sections. It's still the same books that we have. They're separated, they're laid out differently. Like ours ends in Malachi, theirs ends in 2nd Chronicles. But they're the same books, they're just divided differently. So Tanakh's just an acronym for the Torah, the Ketuvim, and the Navim. So it's just letters from that, you know, from the Torah, right? It's just letters taken from that to make a word. The Jews are always doing that. But so the Tanakh, that's their Bible. Go ahead, Blaine. Go to another one. All right, the Torah, gentlemen, the Torah, the law, or the Pentateuch, we also call it, right? Is it Pentas 5, right? So it's those first 5 books. It's those books of Moses, and these specifically were really highlighted for me. I really enjoy them, and they're, you know, considered the most important to the Hebrews. Those books of Moses, and it's where the 613 Levitical laws are laid out, is in these. And so that first 5 I think is really important. And where I started my progression in study was at the end of the Bible, just like everybody else. That's how it always starts. You get a little half Bible when you're a kid and stuff. But so I went backwards in my studies, reading from the New and going back Paul's stuff, or even maybe Revelation, because that's exciting stuff to read. And then Paul's stuff, and then, you know, Gospels, and then the prophets are fun to read in the OT, and of course the battles and stuff in history. But then the law. Somehow God made that exciting to me, that if you want to know anything about the kosher, dietary laws, things like that, like I know, and I did it too. I ate kosher for a year and 9 months just to get closer to this, just to know it more. I went to Sabbath, Shabbat services every Friday night, just to know these things more, know the prayers, be around people, Hebrew-speaking people, know how they do things. So God highlighted this specifically for me. The genealogies, the families, the law. This is also the word for instruction or teaching in Hebrew, Torah is. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, this is what it's compiled of: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. All right, so real quick, we're going to go through some fun, exciting little things from those books. Go ahead. We're going to have to run through some stuff. Okay, first off here, the Aleph Bet. Some of you guys are totally aware of this right now, but for some of our new guys, let's just take 1 second. So, the Hebrew alphabet, and you can see where we get the word alphabet. I'll tell you one thing about this, is that every word in the world, you may think I've never heard a Hebrew word in my whole life. I would say that you've never heard a word that wasn't Hebrew in your whole life. It started that way. I mean, you may hear people trace something back, like the Latin root of some Harris. Well, before that, everything was Hebrew. God spoke Hebrew to Adam. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet were jewels in God's crown. So what they call their alphabet is the Aleph Bet. The Aleph Bet. And the first letter is Aleph. The second letter is Bet. That's where it comes from. It's just Aleph Bet. That's their alphabet. And numerical values. So every letter, this is the second letter of the alphabet, it's Bet. It is a number 2. So if you wanted to know how to do math in Hebrew, you just still would want to know the alphabet. Amen. So that's cool. It's a number 2. But then also, it's a word. And what that word is house. Right? So Bethel is Bethel, house of God. Right? Bethlehem, Bet, is house of bread. Right? So that's an interesting thing. And why I say that is this. That knowing, we're not going to do Hebrew today much, but knowing the original language of the books, guys, is important. And it's an honor that God's allowed us to know some of these things. If you're studying, God's going to leave little spiritual breadcrumbs in this book. It's just meant for you. It's just for you, right? So when I'm looking through this, and God's highlighting those first 5 to me so much, right? And I'm learning about the original language. To me, my mind makes funny connections with things. So I take how the whole Torah starts is in the beginning, God created, right? Bereshit, Elohim, bara, in the beginning, God created. The first letter to Bereshit is Bet, right? It's that. That's Bet. First letter in the whole Bible, but the whole Torah, those first 5 books, the first letter. The very last letter in the Torah is a Lamed of Israel. It's kind of hard to draw a Lamed with a marker, but this is a Lamed. And Israel was the last word in the Torah. So the very last word in Deuteronomy. All right, so I take the very first letter and I take the very last letter in the whole Torah. I put those together, and I'll be darned, it's a word. Because God does these things. And the word is Lev. Lev. Lamed Bet. Lev. Right? And what that word means is heart. Right? And so to me, God has shown me something. He's shown me that for me and my spiritual growth, that those first 5 books need to be the heart of the Bible. And it has been to me. It's helped draw me closer to the Lord every step of the way, because He leaves me these little things that tell me I'm on the right track. And about the numerical value, see, everything God does is perfect, gentlemen. And that word is perfect. And the more that we know about it, the more we see its perfection. In the lettering, Lamed is a 30. It's a number 30. And anyone that wants alphabets, I'd be glad to give them to you. Aleph Bet. I'd be glad to give them to you. So that's a 30. A bet is a 2. 32. And 32 is a very, very sacred number to the Jews. They say that there's something called the 32 paths of wisdom, right? And each one of those also correlate to each of the 32 times that the word Elohim is written in chapter 1 of Genesis, right? So there's just deeper and deeper and deeper things to be found whenever we dig in, right? Amen? Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
You with me, guys? We're just plowing, okay? We're just plowing through. Hey, Blaine, what's the next one?
Creation.
Okay, go on, skip it.
Chapter 6.
So creation, though, it is kind of interesting that, and we talked about when discussing the difficult chapters and stuff. Remember we talked about how some would say that there's the 2 acts of creation. Remember the one in chapter 1, the one in chapter 2, how we kind of looked into that as being a theory among theologians or whatever. That's pretty interesting. The cross and the tree of life, I don't know, that's kind of neat. There's just an old Middle Eastern legend that you remember Shem, Adam's son Shem, the priestly line of Shem. Well, what they say is that when Adam died at 930 years, interesting thing about that too is that I think God had designed Adam to live 1,000 years. There's a book called the Sefer Raziel, and what it says is that Adam was given by this angel Raziel a book of life that had everyone that was ever going to live, and that Adam decided to donate 70 years of his life to a child that was going to be stillborn, and his name was David, right? So when Adam was reading these books, he's talking to God, and he says, let me give 70 years to this man David, all right? They say Adam was really the first prophet. But that's just a nifty little legend. Oh, okay, so Adam's dying, guys. Seth goes, he talks to the angels with the flaming swords that are guarding the tree, begs them for a little piece of the tree to save Adam's life. He gives him a little twig, a branch, one of the angels, right? He goes, Adam's already passed at 930 years. He plants it at the head of his grave. That tree grows, ends up eventually being a plank that was in the Temple of Solomon. Ends up being, it wrote on the ark. It was a plank in the ark. Then it was in the temple, and it ended up being the cross at Golgotha that Christ was crucified on. And that's just a Middle Eastern legend that they all tell, is the story of the tree, the twig of life, they say. And we talked about Genesis 6. Big Chris just was talking yesterday to me about the book of Enoch and how some of these things are interesting supplementary material to the Bible. But what are you doing?
I hit the button much. We're good.
Okay.
I hiccuped.
Real skeleton.
No. That's not a real skeleton, I wouldn't say. But there were real giants, guys. Bottom line, there absolutely were real giants. And there have been some of these things found that I don't think that's a real skeleton. But there have been some neat things found, and there's been some really shady activities that have gone on that have made some of these things disappear too, is what I've read at least. But so the giants in Genesis 6, guys, we can't refute that. Yeah, absolutely, the Nephilim, right? The fallen ones, gentlemen. And so what these extra kind of nifty books, like the book of Enoch that Chris and I were talking about, there's actually 3 books of Enoch, Enoch 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the one that everybody really is always referring to. But what they're dealing with is this one portion of Scripture, is Genesis 6 through 7 or so, is the activity that was going on with the fallen angels. Now, all these extra things, these books of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls that have within it one book that's called Enoch and the Watchers, and one book that's just called the Book of the Giants. The flood myths from just about every civilization discuss the giants as well. But these giants, guys, let's take a look in Genesis 6. Hey, Tom, you got some reading for me?
Yeah.
Are you able?
Absolutely.
Thank you, brother. Cain and Abel. So, interesting, though. Very interesting. So, the book of Enoch discusses in greater detail, God had commissioned these angels to come down.
Yeah.
Take a look at the world, right? They were led by a couple named Azazel and Samjaza. And now, while they're down there, they fell into a lust, is what happened. And it's just what we were talking about in the idolatry class, is they became lustful towards the women, the woman folk, is what happened, right? And they didn't return in time, and God made them stay. Now what it said, go ahead and...
Genesis 6.
Yeah, give me Genesis 6, 1 through... Just read, and I'm going to stop you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me stop you.
Translation.
Go for it, brother.
Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women, and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time.
Okay, let me stop you one sec. So in that verse 2, the sons of God and the daughters of men. See, that's where this comes from. Like in the Jewish Publication Society Bibles, they just say, instead of sons of God, like the word angels is basically the same for sons of God, right? So what they say is that these fallen angels were the sons of God, and that the daughters of men were the daughters of men. Some would say, the late great Vernon McGee says that the sons of God were the line of Seth, and that the daughters of men were the line of Cain. And so the intermingling there was the muddying up of the waters, the godly line of Seth. The muddying up of the waters is what that was. But the popular theory is that they were in fact fallen angels who... Go ahead, continue.
Okay. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women,
Oh, man.
they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times.
Yeah, yeah. So the sons of God and the daughters of men intermingling, and giants on the earth were the response. And so the books of Enoch talk about all this and the interpersonal relationships with the angels and the different types of giants too that were coming up in this time. But then the flood, right? So the flood, and the Talmud is a sacred oral tradition. And so the Jews, their Tanakh, their Old Testament, is more important than the Talmud, but the Talmud is also considered divinely given by God. What the Jews say is that the Talmud was given on Sinai to Moses, and they call it the oral Torah. So there was the written Torah, and then there was the oral Torah to the Jews. And they didn't actually write it down until, years and years into their captivity, where they were worried it was going to be lost. But what the Talmud says is, while Noah's trying to load the ark and stuff, and all these giants are begging to get on the ark, that they're launching their little giant babies at the ark, and it's bam, and it's rocking the ark even, doing these. And that, let me tell you another thing about the flood, guys, is that the Talmud says that the giants were putting their giant feet on these geysers that were coming up from the bottom, and that it was flaying the skin off their feet because the water was so hot. And what you want to know, I think, about the flood is that the world was probably covered by water, right? The canopy theory, they call it, right? Is that the world was probably completely surrounded by water. It's kind of what it looks like. And that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a thing called the Sermon on the Flood that talks, it's Noah talking about the waters from the deep coming up, right? And the waters from above pouring out. And so there hadn't been a rain before that, guys. And what you had there was a hyperbaric chamber, right? Where if we did something like that now, we could grow tomatoes the size of Ted or whatever, right? We could grow big old tomatoes, something like that. We'll say the whole earth was that, and the Bible says people were living for 900 years. Maybe they could. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they did. This says they did, so I'm going to believe that. So maybe that's why. It is just a theory. I'm not a scientist, but maybe that's why. Is that it was a hyperbaric chamber. Right now, there are lizards that don't ever stop growing until they die. No. Say now they live 80 years. Say back then they could live 900 years. They never stop growing. Maybe that's a dinosaur. I don't know. I'm not a paleontologist. I've seen Jurassic Park 20 times. That doesn't make me an expert. But what I'm saying is that maybe that's why. I don't know. But it's interesting. It's downright interesting. Go ahead. We gotta go. Okay, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are my dudes.
Amen.
Yeah. Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. The Akedah was the act of putting Isaac, sacrificing Isaac. It's in theological terms, they call it the Akedah, right? And God stopped him. And if you look at that chapter, it's 21 or 22 of Genesis. If you look at it, there's a bunch of types of Christ there that he was carrying the wood on his back for the altar, right? There's something about the third day that he went. There's something about the mount that it was on. There's some neat typology there. So type of Christ is just You see, the New Testament is concealed in the Old, and the Old is revealed in the New. And so these things work in a beautiful way, right?
Amen.
And so you see Christ all throughout the Old Testament, but you got to look for him wherever you want, right? But so there's a lot of nice typology there. This is where the split came, of course, to Islam. They would say that it was Ishmael that was the one to be sacrificed, and this is where really their key texts take a turn, is at the Akedah. Jacob was the deceiver, you remember that? And, just like us, right? I'll speak for myself, but a liar, a deceiver, they also say a heel grabber, a supplanter is what they call him. But Yaakov, trickster, that was Yaakov, right? And he did, but then after his wrestling with the angel of the Lord, right, he got his name changed to Israel. This is where the state of Israel is named from, was this man. And what Israel means is he who wrestles with the Lord or struggles with the Lord. And that's us, guys. I mean, we're fighting for a name change, and it's happening.
Come on.
It's happening here, but it's only going to come through that struggle, through that fight, through the night, right? That time. Look, the tribes. So this is a little bit different, is that the sons of Jacob. How many sons did Jacob have? 12 sons. How many tribes are there? 12 tribes. The tribes and the sons are not the same thing, though, however. And this is interesting, and something you need to know. If asked, you'll know. I don't know. Obviously not everything that we're going to talk about today is essential for salvation. I get that. But we got a whole Bible here. We got a lot to look at, so we got nothing but time. So let's do that. So the tribes, gentlemen, what happened was the tribes that received allotments of land are not necessarily the sons of Jacob, okay? So the tribe of Levi, yes, there was a tribe, but their, what do you call it? When someone dies and leaves you something. Their inheritance was the Lord, the tribe of Levi. Their whole deal was to take care of it from the tabernacle to the temple. Their whole deal was to take care of the Lord. Where does Levi come from? St. Louis, isn't it? So Levi, though, you've got your Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Eber, Peleg, Ruz, Serug, Nahor, Terah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi. And then Levi had 3 sons. Their names were Gershon, Merari, and Kohath. Now those 3 sons make up the sections, the divisions of the Levites. So some would break and carry the tabernacle, some would do the sacrifice, slaughter the animals, so on and so forth, right? So that's where that comes from. But, so the tribe of Levi did not receive an allotment of land. So they're not, whenever you're talking about the 12 tribes, it's not Levi. So what happened was also, Joseph was the one that received the birthright. He does not have a tribe. His 2 sons, what were their names? Yeah, Manasseh and Ephraim. They received allotments of land. Joseph did not, but he got the birthright, right? So the 12 tribes are not necessarily the 12 sons. That's what I wanted you to know. Funny thing about the birthrights, though, is that, like I talked about in our graduation, it's not, don't ever feel like just because someone gets fired that means it's your position. It's not, until God gives it to you. Your position is only where He wants you to be. If He wants you to be here right now, that's your position.
Come on, man.
Don't try to do Chris's position. Don't try to do mine, because God didn't give it to you yet. He might, But we're all just trying to do our jobs. But the thing is, Abraham had an older brother that got burned in a fire, says the book of Jasher. It talks about in the Bible that he died in the presence of his brother, but it doesn't say he got burned. But the book of Jasher, is a little supplementary material, says that his brother, whose name was, I don't know right now, but got thrown in a fire and burned. Abraham also was thrown in and came out unscathed, right? But so Abraham had an older brother, did not receive the inheritance. Abraham did. Isaac had an older brother whose name was Ishmael. No, they got it. Ishmael. Esau's name. Right. So, yeah, Ishmael, but he didn't receive the birthright, right? Then you had Esau and Jacob, Esau. And then out of the 12 sons, Reuben was the eldest, but he did not receive the birthright. Joseph did. And then Joseph was the same thing with his 2 sons. It wasn't the natural birthright. So don't ever assume anything. Just go out and get it. You know, if there's a position that you want, go out and get it. Don't ever think anyone's going to give it to you. And I see this from the birthrights. This tells me that that's so. Go ahead. Okay, well, hermeneutics and biblical interpretation is what we're doing. I mean, the Messianic scriptures, we talked about the old and the new, okay? Melchizedek, right? This is an interesting figure. And we're only up to like chapter 14 or something when Melchizedek comes in. But interesting for a lot of reasons. Go to 14, will you?
Genesis?
And yeah, Genesis 14, verses 18 through 20. Levi.
Yes.
Read it.
Wait, hold on. Trying to-
Chad, read it.
18.
14, 18
Then
through 20.
Melchizedek, king of Salem.
Okay, stop. Melchizedek. Okay? Now, in Hebrew, guys, Malik is the word for king. It's just the word for king. A Zadik is a righteous one. It's the word for righteousness in Hebrew. Okay? Melchizedek. So it's not his name, it's his title. Okay? Melchizedek. Not his name, but his title. Okay? That's important to know. And his identity is up for grabs. The Jews say that it's Shem, that the king of righteousness was Shem. And they have a lot of things to support that. That Shem was the master teacher at the time, and that people would come for miles to visit him and speak to him. And so in this scripture, Chad, that's enough reading. That's fine. So in this scripture, though, it talks about Abraham giving money to him, right? This was the first time we see the tithe, which is interesting. And you would do that. You give that to your teacher, your rabbi, your pastor, your fellowship. That's what you do. And so that's not hard to believe that it could be Shem. You know, the Christian faith basically all believes that it was a pre-incarnate Christ, that Christ came to visit, as he does Christophany. You know, that he comes to visit, and that was him, a pre-incarnate Christ, the King of Righteousness. Still yet others in the Dead Sea Scrolls that identifies Melchizedek as the Archangel Michael, who's also been known to stop by from time to time. So the identity, though I'm not going to give you my opinion, I don't mind telling you what everyone believes, because I think that's important. I think it's important to know what other faiths believe too. I think that if you don't know your Bible, it's not a good investment to learn about other faiths before you're solid in your own. But I think it's important to know different opinions, and then in your reading, then you form your own. I mean, that's the way I did it at least. Go ahead to the next one. We got a row. Oh, Exodus, beautiful. So I love Exodus, guys, right? And of course, the setting is in Egypt. You've got Moses and delivering the children of Israel from bondage, right? This is a live. That's an actual photo from the event that happened. It was much more intense than the photo would have you believe. Their wanderings, once they're out, is very interesting to look at, and that it's such a type of us in the wanderings, in that, you know, they're finally free from this bondage, and before you know it, they want to go back. They want, there's that fish and leaks or something, you know, but they're getting whipped, and it's awful, right? They want to go back though because they're complaining, and they're not satisfied, right? They're not content. That's important. It's important to be happy. But so, and you see this so often with the children of Israel, and you see it in the 300 to 400 year or so period of the judges, and oddly enough, about the same amount of time that the kings are involved. It's the same thing. Like they'll be solid and they'll have a good leader, and the very next one they're falling apart. They're worshiping idols again. So that's interesting to look at. Mount Sinai and the giving of the law, guys. Praise be. When the law was given, the Jews have an event on their calendar called the Shevuot. That's just in remembrance of the giving of the law on Sinai. The tabernacle, very important. God's first dwelling place on earth that He required us to build. Hey, move on from this. Go to another one. Hey, Leviticus. This is my favorite slide too. That's a cool one. So Leviticus, don't skip it, right? There's something there for you. I promise. Everyone just skips it. And that's not what it's there for. They're to read. And the 613 Levitical laws are in there. And parts of it might be stale. But there's some stuff for you there to read. The offerings, the festivals, and the laws. And it's important reading. And I'll tell you a thing about the first 5 books. The first 5 books are my bread and butter. But I don't like one more than the other. Just because there's so many fun events in Genesis and Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, I don't like them any more than I like this. It's equally precious to me. And it doesn't get that way overnight. If you look at my Bible, I've probably marked up Leviticus more than any book in the Bible. I mean, it's disgusting. You almost can't read it. There's so much crap in it. And it's for us, right? It's there for us. It's not to skip or draw pictures on, right? So just take some time and read it. And I've had a lot of my counselees in the past that have worked through it. Like I always kind of suggest this in the assignment, start from the beginning, page 1, chapter 1, page 1, verse 1. And they always get to Leviticus and they ask me, do I got to read this? Yeah. Well, you don't got to do anything, but I would suggest that you do. Okay, go to the next one. Numbers, I love Numbers. So we talked about the Levites, what their job was. The Nazarites and their vow. Like, who was a couple Nazarites from the Bible?
Ooh.
Samson.
Sure, what's another one?
John the Baptist.
Eating locusts and so crazy guy, camel hair.
Yeah.
Jay the Bee. I love him. Right? Okay, the Nehushtan. This is important, guys. Remember when God sent the fiery serpents and they're biting people?
Yes.
Killing people? You remember that? Well, it's interesting that the Nehushtan is what God told Moses to make, right? And it would cure the dead. Those who were bitten would be cured if they just looked at this thing, right? And so what this is another type of Christ. In that what the snake was on, was that, right? And what it was a golden serpent, right? What it was a golden serpent. So what it was, if we look a little closer, is it was an accursed object. It was an image, a brazen image that God said don't do, basically. But then he told them to do it. And why? Was to give us a type of Christ, to let them see prophetically a type of Christ there. It was an accursed object on a cross that was going to save everybody if they would just look upon it. Right? Amen? It is good, the Nehushtan. But then there's also an idolatry factor. What happened was, in the time of Hezekiah, 2 Kings 18, the people were worshiping the Nehushtan. That's idolatry. That's taking something beautiful, and we're always doing this. We take something beautiful and we make it into an idol. We put it above God. Right?
Come on now.
The spies report, and the negative report of the spies. Remember the 12 went and only the 2 had a positive report? The Jews hate this so much that they say that the negative report of the Hebrew spies fell on the same day that both temples were destroyed. The 9th of Av, Solomon's temple, and then the second temple that Ezra and Zerubbabel and Nehemiah, all these guys built. They were both, 586 and then 70 AD were destroyed, but it was on the same day, they say, the 9th of Av. And they say that the negative report of the spies was on that day. They say that in 132, the Bar Kokhba revolt was crushed by the Romans on the 9th day of Av. And so in the synagogue services, they have an ark where they keep the scrolls that they bring out to read. They put a black sheet over the ark, and they don't bring out the scrolls on the 9th of Av. It's very interesting. But Aaron's rod that budded, the Levitical, all the rods lined up, the Aaron's rod, the Levitical, for the father of the Levitical priesthood, his rod budded, ended up in the Ark of the Covenant, of course. Go ahead. Okay, Deuteronomy is very important. Deuteronomy really means second law, but to the Jews that's kind of insulting. So really what it would be is more of a retelling of the law, because it's recounting all these events that they went through. And it's set up like a treaty. There's a lot to that, but how a treaty's set up with a preamble and blessings and curses and author, that whole book is set up exactly like a treaty. Funny thing about that too is that the word for covenant and an international treaty are the same word. The same word in Hebrew is called berit. It's the exact same word. And what Deuteronomy, the whole book, is a covenant with the people. and it's broke up into these pieces. It's exactly like an international treaty would be set up. It's just very, 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 very nice. Hey, give me, what is it, 34 of Deuteronomy? Take a look at that. No, let's skip the Shema because we did that. Remember Deuteronomy 6, guys? The monotheistic battle cry that we get from Deuteronomy 6:4 is Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. That just means hear, O God, hear, O Lord, the Lord our God is one. Right? Deuteronomy 6:4. That's monotheistic battle cry. That's the Jews' verse. They say it when they wake up and when they go to sleep. That's the Shema. But the end of Deuteronomy is where Moses dies, right? And probably Joshua wrote it, probably, the last couple of chapters or whatever. But let's take a look at this. Chad, give me in verse 34. Start reading from verse 5.
So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of God. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab.
Okay, stop. Buried him. Don't follow me, bro. I'll be right back. He buried him.
Who buried him, brother?
So he buried Chad. Who buried him? Oh my gosh! All right, it was the Lord, guys. He buried him. The Lord buried him. Okay, keep reading.
Opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows his grave.
No one knows.
Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor.
Whoa! His eyes did not grow dim, nor his vigor abated. Amen? Funny thing about that. Okay, so say Moses is dead, all right, and he's buried. What that means is his eye didn't grow dim, nor his vigor abated, I think, is that he's not decaying, right? He was so beloved of the Lord that he was buried, but he won't decay. He won't turn into worm food, because his eye didn't grow dim, nor his vigor abated. But why is that? Well, you could say possibly in Revelation 11, right, that he could be one of the witnesses. A lot of people think so, because that chapter talks about controlling of the, of the elements and things like Moses did. I think it's probably going to be Enoch and Elijah, because it's appointed once for every man to die. But, there's arguments for that, guys, and it's not that I'm telling you that one way or another is necessarily right, but there's arguments about Moses being not decaying for a reason. There's arguments for that, and they're fair, legitimate arguments. You look in the book of Jude about, it says that Satan and Michael were fighting over the body of Moses. It doesn't say the bones, it doesn't say the leftovers, it says the body of Moses that they were fighting over. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Right? In the book of Jude, there's a lot of interesting tellings in that. It also talks about angels that didn't do as they were commanded, being chained up underground for eternity. And that goes back to those fallen angels, the ones that in the book of Enoch, that it says Raphael was sent, he took them, he chained them up underground, put a mountain on top of them where they're chained for eternity. Jude looks into that. He quotes directly from the book of Enoch, verses 14 through 21 in the book of Jude. Quotes directly from the book of Enoch. Those are interesting things, right? There's a lot of arguments for the Enoch witness standpoint also, but so I think it's interesting that God loved Moses so much that he did not, his eye didn't grow dim nor his vigor abated. And about it, that it's appointed once for every man to die, some people would argue, and they're right. They could take, they're right to be able to argue the point, is what I'm saying. There's a portion of Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, that tells that Moses was taken up by the Lord in a rainbow, and that he didn't die, and that they wrote it like that so that the Hebrews wouldn't worship him as God. They wrote it down because they knew everyone would worship him as God if he was taken up, because he was that beloved. So people use that. They take, you glean from these different sources, and you form your opinion on that, right? So I believe that he died because the Word says that he does, but other people will use these other things. Go ahead, continue.
All right.
Okay, the historical books. Joshua, his name is Jesus. It's the same name. Jesus is just Yehoshua. Jesus is the Greek form of Joshua, and it means salvation, right? So Joshua is a type of Christ in a million different ways, but even just in his name. What he did was perform the conquest of the 31 kings, the 31 Canaanite kings. period of the Judges was a constant going to, falling away. We have some of those hero judges, the Samsons, the Gideons. Keep going. Ruth, of course, the line of Christ. Guys, 1st and 2nd Samuel, right, DJ?
Yes, sir.
Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Chapter 5. Remember with in the ark with Dagon. You can't put idols in with the ark, boys. Can't do it. Saul. Everybody looks just terribly on Saul. Like he's such a dirtbag. But let's remember that the children of Israel voted this guy. They wanted him. This guy was the first king of Israel. Let's give him a little bit of credit. Guys, Shaul. I mean, what he did was he died fighting for Israel. Fighting these Philistines. Died right next to his sons. Died fighting for Israel. So let's not always put him down. David and Jonathan were in covenant together, right? Right? David and Jonathan, Saul's son, were in covenant.
Yep.
So when they die in this battle, David sends for the armor. Right? He brings the armor back. He forms them like this. With David's shield and Jonathan's shield on top of each other to form this. And whenever they were victorious in battles, they would come back into the city and David would hold his shield, he'd be in front, he'd hold his shield. And it formed, this was the sign, this was the victory sign, this was it. And then later, much later, becomes the sign of Israel, of course. And it's also, they've taken it now to mean like an arrow pointing up to the heavens, arrow pointing down to the earth, and you just put those together. Heaven and earth. See, the Jews are very, very much into making heaven on earth. They consider themselves way more earthly minded than heavenly minded. Like they think that we're overly heavenly minded. Like they think that we're just doing kind acts and all this stuff like to gain favor so that we can get to heaven or whatever. They think that they're just doing it just to help. And that goes back to Zadok. You remember Melchizedek, that Zadok means righteousness, you remember that?
Yep.
Well, the word Zadok for righteousness is also the same word for charity, right? So you pass a homeless guy on the street, charity and righteousness being the same thing, why do you care if he's going to get a bottle of wine with the $5 that you give him? All you can do is control yourself. That's a good lesson for while we're here. All you can do is take care of yourself. You can't worry about your roommate that stinks or snores or whatever, or you can't worry about this and that. You're not the one writing people up now, and so you can't worry about why that. All you can worry about is how you control yourself. But so, righteousness and charity, same thing. It's the righteous thing to do, to give every opportunity that we've got, just to give without worrying about motives. Okay, go ahead. A kingdom divided. So the Kings and Chronicles, what happened was Solomon's son Rehoboam, that there was a split in the kingdom. And that's what you read about in Kings and Chronicles. There was a split because Rehoboam, listening to his friends, was going to increase the labors on Israel and the taxation. And there became a split in the kingdom where the 10 northern tribes seceded and created Israel with the capital of Samaria. The 2 lower tribes, Judah and Benjamin, stayed to create Judah, which is where we get the term Jew. It's from Judah. So there was a split in the kingdom, and all this is... and of course it's about the building of the temple, the dimensions, about the Queen of Sheba. Maybe got knocked up by Solomon, having an Ethiopian child. They say that maybe the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. All the Ethiopians sure believe that. And there's a huge Ethiopian Jewish population that they say came from this. They even have parades where they march effigies of the Ark of the Covenant up and down the streets. I mean, they believe that it's there. Some believe that it's in the tunnels underneath Jerusalem. But I think Jeremiah basically put it in a mountain and that God covered it up. And see, all the things for the third kingdom are already built, except the building. But all the implements are built in Israel for the third temple. And whenever it's constructed, God's going to release the Ark of the Covenant, and it's going to come on back. That's the only thing that they're not going to build. It's the Ark of the Covenant, because it's going to come back. But, so there's a split. And, of course, you get master prophets like these 2 coming up out of there that you get to read about, and all their awesome, 7 miracles, 14 miracles, double portions. The genealogies, of course, you see some of that. And then one that was unprovoked by David that caused a lot of death and destruction. But temple principles, just you read these Old Testament things, and you read things about the tabernacle and how it's set up. Not all that super interesting, guys. But hey, here we go. But can we glean from this, spiritually speaking? We don't approach God in our prayer life and in our study life. We don't just jump in the Holy of Holies.
Oh.
Why would we expect that from Him? Why would we expect to get a breakthrough in our studies when we've only read for 10 minutes? Because Blaine and Chris told us to. Why would we expect God to reveal something incredible to us when we haven't tried that hard?
Come on now.
Right? So you approach Him like this. Go to the brazen altar first. Go to the outer court. Right? Go to the brazen laver. You know, and you do that in your prayer and study life. You approach it bit by bit. Right? Shaving a haircut. You just approach it bit by bit, guys. Right? Study for 30 minutes. Study for an hour. Study for an hour and a half. And then you're in the Holy of Holies, spiritually speaking, in your study life and in your prayer life, and then things are going to, go ahead, then things are going to happen. Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Ezra means help. Nehemiah means God has consoled. Esther means star. Zerubbabel, though, was another heavy hitter in this area. His name means begotten in Babylon. So what the Second Temple period are the books that were written in Aramaic. In your Old Testament, the only ones that weren't Hebrew in your Old Testament are the Ezra, and Nehemiah, and Esther books. Okay, and that's the Second Temple period. And what happened was, Babylon destroyed Israel, or Judah, and the temple in 586 BC. Babylon took the Jews into exile. Later, Babylon was destroyed by Persia, and that was prophesied about by Isaiah, that a non-godly person, a pagan, would allow the children of Israel to come home. That was prophesied. And so that happened. Persia defeated Babylon. They let the Jews go home. But there's other people living there at the time. And they have to rebuild the temple now. I mean, there's a lot to it. And Bob the Builder up there. See that? See that? Good, decent slide, I think. So, rebuilding of the temple, the leadership of these guys. Zerubbabel led the first group of exiles back. Ezra the second. Nehemiah the third. And finished the wall in 52 days. Big time stuff, guys. The Persian influence at the time. Esther was a heroine in Judah that you'll read about in the Apocrypha that decapitated Holofernes. For my Catholic brothers,
There it is.
Esther was Persian influence. The Persian god Ishtar is where she got her name from. She had a Hebrew name also that was Hadassah, the myrtle tree. So there's some powerful women in the scriptures, gentlemen, that saved the people. Go ahead. I'd love to spend more time on Ezra. He's really an amazing man and influence. And we're talking about naming our son Ezra. He's just Job, old Job. So they say that maybe it's the oldest book. That first chapter is real interesting. How God in a conversation and almost betting with the enemy, and how he's coming to and from the earth. But what you see in that is that the enemy can't do anything without God's knowing, without his permission.
Man.
Absolutely. Isn't that interesting? Friends, question mark. And you get that. You'll have friends saying, oh, you must have sin in your life. You got a problem. Or maybe you don't and God's testing you. Maybe God's saying, have you considered my servant to get better? I don't know. You got in the later chapter, so this is just like 30 chapters of them berating him, kind of, and they're back and forth. You've got some interesting Behemoth and Leviathan. They come there in chapters 40 and 41 and stuff that God's talking about. He talks about the canopy. But, those things probably were something like dinosaurs,
Yeah.
A lot of these study Bibles say that they think the Behemoth was like a hippopotamus and Leviathan was like an alligator. I mean, that could be, but like times 10, I would think. And there's a whole bunch of neat text that talk about these guys and about when God created them and about how they were so monstrous that God had to kill one of them, because if they mated, they would take over the world, right? And so there's also a neat story about that Leviathan comes out of the sea once a year, and he lets out such a great cry that it frightens all the sea life just enough to where they don't overeat or undereat. It keeps the balance. And that the Behemoth does the same thing on the land. And they say that there's a flying animal called the Ziz that they talk about too, but it's not mentioned in the Bible. You know what? There is a version of the Bible that says Ziz at one point. But that's what it's talking about. Also they say, the Jews say that there's something of a marriage feast in the end times, and that we'll be dining on Behemoth and Leviathan, is what they say. Go ahead to the next one. Go on. All right, the Job was the beginning of the wisdom literature. Hey, someone give me a couple Proverbs. Someone, 120 of Proverbs. Give me 2:6. Jake, give me 3:13. Big Jim, give me 4:7. Okay. So the Psalms, though, it's interesting that if you were to lay out the scrolls of the whole Bible, that directly in the middle would be Psalm 118. And Psalm 119 is the longest chapter in the Bible, 176 verses. Psalm 117 is the shortest chapter in the Bible. So directly in the middle there, you got your Psalms. You got some big ones, of course. So 119 I love. 91's powerful and victorious. Chapter 23, at every funeral you've ever been to. I mean, these are big time. But the Psalms, you could spend forever talking about the Psalms. They're just so beautiful. Give me some of those Proverbs.
Okay. Proverbs 1, verse 20. Wisdom calls aloud in the street, she
Yeah, she
raises
does.
her voice in the public square.
Yeah. Yes, she does. Go ahead. Tell me.
Proverbs 2:6. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding.
Yeah. Next.
3:13. Joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding.
Yep.
4:7, the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding.
Mm-hmm. So what it was, Proverbs was a letter from Solomon, wisest man ever, other than Jesus, to his son Rehoboam. And it's about just how to live life. So what we got to do is apply these things and realize that the wisest man that ever lived up to that point tells us, gives us some lessons here. We should listen, right? Ecclesiastes is also Solomon, and I love how it starts about vanity, that he's been there and done that, and that aside from God, it's all meaningless. The Song of Solomon, the interpretations of that are different, just like with Melchizedek, where some would say that it's about Christ and the church. Some would say that it's God the Father and Israel. Some would say that it's just the physical relationship of Solomon and the maidens. Go ahead. The prophets. The prophets are harbingers. Right? The prophets are nothing but harbingers. They tell of what's to come. And in the Bible, these were basically all these books of prophecy here in the Bible, the major and minor prophets are about destruction that's going to happen, right? And they're trying to help people out. You see the harbinger comes, and then God always brings the judgment, like Noah and the flood, right? Like the witnesses in chapter 11 of Revelation, but then the apocalypse, right? Like Elijah trying to get people steer away from Baal. These prophets of Baal, stop it. But then he sent judgment with Jehu, the 10th king of Israel, to wipe out that whole house of Ahab, guys. Right? So he sends a harbinger, then he sends judgment. The prophets are the harbingers. Isaiah, of course, in the captivity, guys, chapter 6, 7, you've got the Messianic prophecy. 6, you've got that vision with the flowing train. And chapter 14 is where we get some of that theology about Lucifer and the I will statements of Lucifer. 53 is a big one, right? The suffering servant chapter. And his death. And it's funny about his death that Manasseh, they say, sawed him in half. But see, everyone believes that, but where they get it is church history, okay? So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to read some of these other texts once you know your Bible, right? You wouldn't know how special the book of Jasher was if you didn't know why and where it supplements your Bible. It wouldn't be special to you. Go ahead. Church history, though. Okay, Jeremiah. Jeremiah is called. Remember, it says God put His word in his mouth. Okay. With Isaiah, it says God touched the coal to his lips. Right. With Ezekiel, it says that he ate a scroll. Right. So again, you see another key point about the prophets is that they're doing what God put in their mouth. Okay. I'm sure what I meant here was 28, about the other Luciferian theology stuff where we get the things about Lucifer. 41, the Feast of Gedalia. What had happened was there was a mayor basically set up, a Jew, and a guy named Ishmael and some other Jews murdered him. And on the Hebrew calendar now they have a feast for Gedalia. And I just thought that was fun to put in. Lamentations I love, it's more Jeremiah stuff. Oh no, Ezekiel, I was on Jeremiah. Ezekiel here, you got 28, where you get the other philosophies about the enemy, right? Chapter 28. You got 37 with the bones on the flesh, getting flesh on the bones. Right, chapter 1 pretty wild in Ezekiel, right? But go ahead. Daniel, chapter 3, of course, with the furnace, kids in the furnace. 6 with the lion's den, the prayer where he prayed, and Michael and the 21 days fighting with the prince of Persia, yeah, in the air. Took 21 days to get down, right? Chapter 12, the abomination of desolation. Some would say that this already happened during the Maccabean events, that king defiling the temple during the Maccabean period was that. But I would say that it's to come, that it's still to come, and that third temple will be defiled by the Antichrist, right? So that's where we get theology about the abomination of desolation. Someone read this Joel 2, 27 through 29. Read that. Go ahead, Tom, you're the man. Joel 2, 27 through 29. And then Jonah, we'll come right back to you, Tom. Jonah, this is where you see where it's a harbinger and then it's a judgment. Jonah, great book, a lot of types of Christ in that, and a lot that we can apply to ourselves. But see, Jonah was the hope. Jonah was the harbinger. And then Nahum, if you've read, is nothing but blood and destruction. Nahum was the antithesis of Nineveh. Nahum was prophet to Nineveh. So is Jonah. Hope, harbinger, destruction, and death is how it works with harbingers. Go ahead, Tom.
This is the Lord's promise of restoration. It says, "Then you will know that I am among my people Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and there is no other. Never again will my people be disgraced. Then, after doing all these things, I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. In those days I will pour out my spirit even on servants, men and women alike."
Hey, that's a promise, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he is in the midst of Israel, and his people will never be put to shame. Go ahead to the next one. Okay, Zechariah and Haggai. We got Second Temple period prophets. Zerubbabel and Joshua also some say could be the witnesses because in Zechariah it talks about them being the lampstands and so on and so forth. And so that makes people think of that Revelation 11 stuff. Malachi just means messenger. And so a lot of people say that maybe he is in fact Ezra. And basically any book that they don't know who wrote it, they always say is Ezra, like Chronicles and Kings and stuff, because Ezra was such a BA. The tithes, we get a lot from Malachi and from Leviticus, where those two big tithing portions come in. And then in Genesis too, with Melchizedek. Chapter 4 in Elijah. The interesting thing about the Passover with the Jews is that they leave an empty chair and they leave an extra glass for Elijah. You know how our Malachi ends, where it talks about, it's chapter 4, verse 5, about Elijah coming back. And this is what they're waiting for, because they're waiting for the Messiah, and maybe that he could be, so leave an extra chair. Hey, so, principles that we're learning, right? Like temple principles in our prayer life, approaching it slowly and with caution, right? Things like this. The theology of being on holy ground right now, that this could be holy. Kick off your shoes in your rooms, because this is holy ground, guys. There are parallels to the Bible that we're learning, and even from these somewhat portions of the Bible that may be somewhat stale to some, there are beautiful spiritual breadcrumbs there that are just for you, right? And they're life-changing. They're life-changing. This word is so vast and so wonderful that there's nothing to match it, and you could never know it. See, you could take that book and you could know it. You could know everything about it. This, you work your whole life and you'll just know a portion of it. But while you're reading it, there's transformation taking place. So you're learning, you're being transformed. It's transforming your heart. Let me tell you something. I don't act today the way that I acted then, and it's because of this. And I've grown. I went from being homeless under a bridge, out of my mind, talking to people, being a terrible dad, being just a scumbag, couldn't help nobody. I came here with Chad and Corey. Chad was my roommate. and we cried together, and we studied together, we grew together, and I've never stopped. And now I have a life, and a wife, and kids, and dogs, and friends, and a position, and partners, and best friends in the world. You know, some of the best people I've ever met, I've met here. But this is what got me there. This is what got me from a scumbag, swinging on people in bars, gambling, drinking, shooting up, meth, heroin, pills, stealing, dirtbag, to where I am now. The things I do throughout the day, I'm amazed with. And it's just God using me. He decided to pick me up, dust me off, and use me instead of waste me or let me die, because he could have and he should have probably, but he didn't, because he has a plan. Right? But his plan's in here. His plan's in here, and it's not only in the verses of Paul that's real exciting. Paul's like Vince Lombardi. He's always he's like, it's like a pregame deal with the football team. And the Gospels are great, and Revelation's great, and the history books in the New Testament are great. But don't skip out on that OT. Don't let it fall by the wayside, even when it doesn't seem exciting, okay? Because it's transformative. All right? That's it. Love you guys. Thank you.